Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to England once again for the first time in what feels like a good little while, although in reality it's not actually been that long. The last English review that I did for you was sometime in late January or early February when I was back home in Scotland. We actually reviewed a good number of very nice English beers during my Christmas break this time. But yeah, we've got another interesting one to have a look at today, and it's nice to make a little bit of an English comeback if you like. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to have a look at a beer from a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, and if memory serves me correctly, this is a style that I haven't tried from them yet. So I have to say I'm very curious about this one because I have been enjoying some very nice examples of this style from various different breweries and countries over the last little while. So yeah, for this one then, we are going to go to the little town of Buxton, which is a bit to the southeast of Manchester and the southwest of Sheffield, right in the heart of the Peak District, which is supposed to be very picturesque, somewhere that I do still need to go and visit. And we're going to return to Buxton Brewery. So this particular beer is called Rudenko. It comes in at 12.5% ABV, and this one is a barley wine, and it's aged in bourbon barrels. So yeah, I think this one should be quite interesting. This is part of their 2020 Barrel Master series. I've had one or two barrel aged beers from these guys before, but when it comes to Buxton, I mean, these guys are just a very, very solid all-round brewery. I've really enjoyed the beers that I've had from these guys over the years. The last beer that I reviewed from them was the Kingslayer, which from what I understand the recipe has changed for that a little bit over the last couple of years, but I really enjoyed that one. I've had some really nice stouts from these guys, big imperial stouts and various other things. So yeah, to try my first barley wine I think should be really quite interesting. But we got this beer here as part of the Tillfälliga temporary assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and I forget exactly what day it was, but it was released in one of the kind of mid-March 2021 releases. We get basically new beers every Tuesday through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and it was released in one of the ones in mid-March 2021. But yeah, really nice to return to Buxton Brewery once again. Very curious to see how this beer turns out, and hopefully it makes for an interesting review for both myself and for you guys watching. So yeah, let's go for it then and see how we got on. Just check that my OCD is happy. I think it is in this case. Yeah, got the little viewfinder here, and then I always want to make sure that the beer is centered and things. But there we go. So yeah, 12.5% bourbon barrel aged barley wine. This one, my first barley wine from Buxton Brewery, if memory serves me correctly. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Buxton Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity at the moment, but when I go home to Scotland, it's added to quite frequently, of course. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Buxton Brewery then, on to my brewery notes once again. So yeah, as I've mentioned to you already, Buxton Brewery is based in a little town called Buxton, which is a spa town in Derbyshire in England, a little bit to the southeast of Manchester and to the southwest of Sheffield, right in the heart of the Peak District, which, as I said, is supposed to be very picturesque. But this brewery is one of the really well-established ones in England, I think it's fair to say. But the brewery began with the first ever brew by Jeff Quinn back in 2009, and he'd studied physics and had a background in engineering before he started the brewery up. But for a period of time, this brewery cuckoo brewed, gypsy brewed, contract brewed, whatever you want to call it, at another local microbrewery. I think they brewed at quite a few different breweries in the local area before they got their own facility up and running in January of 2010. But in the beginning, these guys were only producing batches of 800 litres, and they've scaled up significantly since then, of course. But today, the brewery can be found on Staden Lane in Buxton. It's got 7,000 square feet of space, and at full capacity, it can produce around a little bit over 60,000 litres of beer per month from what I understand, but at the moment they are looking to expand that capacity even further. But the beers these days are exported worldwide. Buxton Brewery are probably one of the best known English craft breweries these days, in fact. But they've won many accolades and awards over the years, and the brewery has been consistently ranked in the world's top 100 breweries by Rate Beer. And as I said, I've never been disappointed with a beer that I've had from these guys. But as I mentioned to you already as well, the local area that these guys are from is known as the Peak District. It's been famed for its water since Roman times. The Romans actually named the town Aqua Arnimatea, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. I never studied Latin at school, but the name Aqua Arnimatea actually translates to the waters of the goddess of spring. So obviously they thought very highly of it. But most of the beers that these guys had initially were named after local geographical and geological features around the Buxton area, and the symbol that they, I don't know if they still use it, but they had a symbol that they used to use on a lot of their beers, which was actually, it was a tower basically. So it was Solomon's Temple, or Grinlow Tower as it was also known, and this was a folly tower that was built simply for decoration actually. But since 2013, the brewery have also had their tap house in the old courthouse in George Street in Buxton, so I hope that I can go and visit that at some stage. I would really love to go and have a little look at the Buxton tap room. And as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this particular beer for you, they've produced around 185 different kinds of beer thus far. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Buxton Brewery for the moment. They are looking to expand again at the moment with new equipment and things like that. They're constantly upgrading their brewery and things from what I understand. But yeah, they have been pretty prolific over the years, and you can get some very, very nice beers from these guys, in fact. So yeah, I think when I do my little England tour at some stage, I would like to go and have a look at what Buxton Brewery have in their tap room. I think that could be a very interesting wee trip to do. So maybe some of the English beer tubers will join me for that, and we can film an out and about video. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Buxton Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer itself then. So, as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty nice. I mean, if you want to learn more about this brewery, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages for all those different beers if you're interested. But as you can see with this one, the artwork on this one is referring to chess. So why, you might ask? The name Rudenko, this beer is named after Lyudmila Rudenko, who was a Ukrainian Soviet chess player. She was one of the first female world champions in chess, from what I understand, in the early 50s. I think she won the world championship twice, if I remember correctly. I had a little look for the name beforehand, but yeah, it makes sense. If you put in Rudenko chess, you can read all about Lyudmila Rudenko. So yeah, obviously named as a little bit of a tribute to her. But as you can see, this beer is part of the 2020 Barrel Masters series at Buxton Brewery. So yeah, I think this should be quite nice. It says on the back here, smooth and highly drinkable with notes of vanilla and oak running through, caramel and toffee on the palate with a malt, oak and bourbon all to the fore. But yeah, we'll come to our own taste and notes, of course. But yeah, this one is a 330 milliliter can. I think I paid about 60 or 70, I think maybe about 70 Swedish kroners for this one. So this was about maybe yeah, that's maybe about €7, maybe about £6.30, something like that. Yeah, about £6.30, and in American dollars it's maybe about $8 or $8.50 American, something like that. So yeah, for a 330 milliliter can, it's I think that's a fair price when you consider that it's barrel aged and it's 12.5%. Black top on the can, of course. But yeah, let's have a little look at this one and see how we get on then. Very curious about this beer, so time to crack in. It doesn't say how long it was aged for, but yeah, no sign of that on the can. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Definitely nice to return to Buxton after a little while. But it was the name that just kind of caught my eye with this one, and I have been enjoying some really nice barley wines over the last little while. So I kind of thought, well, Buxton releasing a barley wine over here in Sweden, because usually we get the very good Buxton beers through Systembolaget here, and I just kind of thought, well, why not? Let's have a go at this one. Have a go at my first Buxton barley wine. I'm just checking that this is lined up, of course, my OCD kicking in again. But yeah, that's it poured. So yeah, as you could see, before the head fades away, it poured with about a 1/4 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawny coloured head. That's faded away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, but round the edge of the glass there is a nice little bit of a kind of ring there, which I do like. But yeah, it goes together really quite nicely. So yeah, I think it looks very good. So yeah, little thin wispy foamy layer on top of that, and a nice little bit of a kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass. So yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, this is actually a very, very deep ruby, which is kind of interesting. It's actually very clear, just a little touch of a kind of natural haze or natural opacity to it. So yeah, I do like how that goes together in this beer. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it does actually look pretty damn nice, I have to say. I think it looks pretty cool. I'm just surprised at how sort of ruby this beer is. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on the camera right enough, but this has got a lovely ruby note to it, with just a little hint of a kind of chestnutty type colour as well. So yeah, the ruby note and the ruby hue to this beer, I think, is absolutely lovely. So yeah, I think this one is going to be very, very nice, and you can see how thick and oily this one is just when you sugar it up a little bit. You can see how long the lacing just takes to settle back down. But yeah, pretty much you know, quite a clear beer this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sitting on the side of the glass there, and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice. So yeah, in terms of a barley wine, not overly surprising. Definitely one of the redder and more kind of ruby coloured ones that I've come across before. So yeah, I certainly like how this one. Goes about its business. To be honest with you, it certainly looks the part of a barley wine. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about the appearance of this one. Then let's have a closer look at the aroma before we taste the beer. Why not? Oh, that smells absolutely beautiful. Just going to say that straight away. Beautiful smelling beer, absolutely. Yeah, I love a good barley wine. I've been getting really, really into this style again recently. It's just amazing, you know, when you've reviewed so many beers, you start to go through phases where you're like, you know, in recent times I was really, really into my lagers, and for some reason again I've been starting to get very much into my barley wine. So any barley wine that I see, oh, you know, bugger it, let's have a go at this. And that was the main reason that I bought this one, to be honest. I'd had some really nice barley wines over the last little while, but this one just smells absolutely lovely. Remember, of course, that a barley wine is basically the big brother of a double IPA. Paleo IPA, double IPA, and then barley wine are all related to each other through the malt to hops ratio. They're all related styles. But yeah, barley wines, I love them, absolutely love them. But where do we start with the aroma of this one? Yeah, the backbone of this beer, as you would expect, is the barrel-aged side of things. You've got a lovely, smooth, oaky backbone to the beer, quite a bit of vanilla coming out of this one. Absolutely, I would agree with what they say on the can there. You can smell that lovely smooth oaky backbone to the beer. A little bit further forward on the nose you're getting some of the vanilla, and you can smell that sort of bourbon quality just kind of infused into the big woody notes that you're getting out of the beer. For me, American bourbon has always been a little bit more kind of sugary than Scotch whiskey, of course. So the American bourbons have got a real kind of sweetness to them. It's almost, for me, it's not quite as sweet as rum right enough, but it's got a little bit of a kind of, it's got a little touch of a kind of sugarcaney element to it, whereas the Scotch whiskies, while some of them could be very sweet, they tended to be a little bit more sort of grainy, if you like. But American bourbon whiskey, for me, has always been really brown sugary and very, very sweet. So yeah, you get a lot of that lovely smooth oakiness in there, a bit of vanilla, and some kind of bourbony things in there as well, which is really nice. You do get a good few nutty elements out of this beer as well, for sure. There's a lot of nuttiness there towards the kind of front of the nose, but that evolves out of the vanilla, I would say. But yeah, the aroma of that beer is very, very nice. Yeah, backbone of that beer is just spot on. But there's a lot of brown sugar in this one. There's a lot of brown sugar in this one, definitely. You've got a really, you can tell with a barley wine like this. One of the things I should have mentioned earlier is that the colour of these beers are dependent on the wort boil, the type of malts that you use in the first instance, and then the length of your wort boil. The more you boil the wort, the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised. Thus, you get a darker colour of beer. But it's also determined by the malts you use in the first place. But a big barley wine like this is going to undergo a boil of like 4 or 5 hours, something like that. So you're going to get a good bit of highly caramelized brown sugar out of this one. This is definitely one of the kind of sweeter smelling barley wines that I've come across in recent times. That's probably partially attributed to the bourbon factor that's going on with this. But this one, to me, it actually comes across as quite fudgy. It almost reminds me a little bit of vanilla fudge in a lot of ways. But you do get a good little bit of sweet, like straight up sweet caramel under that, and then there's a tiny little hint of a kind of treacly sort of thing. But the brown sugars for me are very bright. They're not like highly caramelized and dark in a way, if that makes sense. Yeah, the whole vibe about this beer, I think, is it's just really nice. It's a very bright and very sweet smelling barley wine in a lot of ways. So yeah, fudge for me. Sweet caramel a little bit underneath. You've got a little bit of a more highly caramelized, darker brown sugar in a way. You've got a little bit of that underneath, but that's quite minimal. This one really is a little bit sort of brighter in things. And there's maybe a teeny little hint of a sort of bready-ish kind of quality of the beer, but that is very, very minimal. This beer is all about the brown sugar. It's all about the kind of woody backbone and the vanilla and stuff like this. It's definitely one of the sweeter barley wines that I've come across, aroma-wise, in recent times. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me in terms of the malty side of the aroma. I think this one goes together very, very well, actually. I don't think there's too much more that we can say about the malty side of this beer, to be honest with you. So let's move on to the hoppy and fruity side of things. Yeah, hoppy wise, I mean, you do get a little bit of hop out of this one. Probably this beer will be used in something along the lines of, Northern Brewer from Germany is quite popular in Doppelbock in England. The East Kent Goldings can be used for these things, but Bramling's Cross is quite popular for barley wines and giving you these red fruity characteristics. In America, you've got Summit and Eureka, and Williamette, I think, are quite popular in these sort of beers. You can put a bit of Cascade in them as well, to be honest, and Cascade can work very, very well in barley wines. So I think it's one of these types of hops that are in here for sure. But with it being barrel aged and with it being it's the 2020 series, and we're 3 months into we're 3 months into 2021 now. Quite a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one, but you do get little hints of it. I mean, there's a teeny little bit of earthiness there. You can smell a little touch of a herbal quality as well, but on the front of the nose you do get a little element of kind of floral aromaticity, which I do like, and there's a little bit of a grassy zestiness there as well, but that's quite minimal compared to the big brown sugary elements that are going on in the beer. But yeah, there are the remnants of some hoppy characteristics to this beer for sure, but again, the hoppy side of the beer complements the malty and barrel aging side of things very well. But on the fruity side of the beer, I think this is where it really shows what it's all about. The fruity side of the beer for me is it's got a really juicy and kind of figgy backbone to it. There is a little bit of that kind of thicker, oily, plummy note to it, and it's got a wee tiny touch of a sharper raisin, but not a lot for me. I think the figs, I think it leans a little bit more towards the plums rather than the sharp raisins, but there's a few kind of black curranty elements out of this one. I don't get so much of the sharper raisin or sharper blackberry notes out of this beer. It really strikes me as being more kind of juicy and plummy, figgy, and then just a little bit black curranty. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think, really works together very well, in fact. So yeah, it does the job. It really does the job quite nicely for me, this one, in terms of the aroma. That's a beautiful smelling barley wine. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it's about time we had a taste of this beer. Yeah, so this one is the Rudenko, a 12.5% bourbon barrel aged barley wine from Buxton Brewery in Buxton in the Peak District in England. Let's get stuck into this. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's very nice. When you take the beer in initially, when you take it in at the start, it does come across as a little bit dark, and you wonder, oh, is this going to be a little bit more toasted and things? But then in the aftertaste, that's when you really get the sweeter elements out of this one. I like how it goes. I like how it goes together. This I'm going to say straight away, thumbs up to Buxton Brewery for this. This is another solid beer, but you know, I wouldn't expect anything less of these guys. They're a very, very capable brewery, absolutely. Yeah. Kind of regret that it's been taking me so long to have a go at one of their barley wines now, definitely. Yeah. So where do we start with this one? Where do we start with this? Yeah. When you take this beer in, as I say, the brown sugars actually come across as very slightly toasted and like really highly caramelized. They've just got a little bit of darkness about them, if that makes sense. But the beer really mellows out nicely as you go further into the aftertaste. It does have an element. I mean, there's always this debate about, you know, English or American barley wines, and the American barley wines, of course, tend to be a lot sweeter than the English ones do, whereas the English ones are a bit more kind of toasty, and they've got a little bit more of that kind of phenolic, medicinal type fruity quality to them in my experience, whereas the American ones are, you know, just more kind of juicy and sweet in terms of fruity character. But yeah, this beer is interesting in that it is showing a mix of both American and English character. So yeah, that's another interesting point about this one. When you take the beer in at first, it really shows you some of those darker brown sugary notes that you would expect with it's showing you some of those darker brown sugary notes that you would expect with an English barley wine. So yeah. But yeah, this is a really it is a really very nice beer, this one for sure. Yeah, let's start and just try and break down the flavour of this one then. So straight away with this beer, as you would expect, the malty backbone of the beer is you can feel that nice smooth oaky woody quality in there. There's a little bit of a spicy sort of thing as well to it. It does develop a little touch of a kind of spicy note the further you go into the aftertaste. It's almost like a little, I don't know if it's right to say cherry wood or something, but yeah, you can feel that nice smooth oaty. You can smell that nice smooth oaty, not oaty, oaky, that nice smooth oaky backbone to the beer there, and then it just develops a little bit of dryness and a little bit of spice the further you go into the aftertaste. Absolutely. But yeah, that kind of blankets the middle third of your palate. Towards the front half of that middle third, you do get a nice little bit of vanilla kind of coming out of the beer, and on top of that whole thing, you can really just get a bit of that, you know, bourbon brown sugar sort of thing that I was talking about. As I was saying earlier, I've always found that the American bourbons were significantly more kind of sweet and things like that, and they've just got they're always a bit more kind of caramelly and biscuity, if you like, compared to the Scotch whiskies. So you've just got a little layer of that bourbon brown sugar kind of sitting there on top of the wood, but the wood is most definitely the backbone of the beer. You will notice that on the front half of that middle third of your tongue, there is an element of nuttiness, pushes its way out of this beer as well, which I really, really like. So yeah, there's definitely that little bit of you definitely get that nice kind of vanilla nutty kind of quality sitting there on the front half of that middle third of your tongue. It's really nice how that evolves. At this beer, it really sweetens up. Those elements that I'm talking about now really sweeten up the further you go into the aftertaste of the beer. But yeah, in that middle third of your palate as well, on top of those woody elements, you can feel that nice, big, oily, highly caramelised brown sugary note in this one. It doesn't come across as overly treacle-like. It's not the darkest of kind of treacle notes that I've had, but yeah, the sitting on top of those elements there's definitely a wee hint of there's definitely a sort of circle in the middle of your palate where it's that big, highly oily, highly caramelized treacle molasses sort of thing. So yeah, and as you move in the very center of it, it's a little bit kind of sweeter and more caramelly, which I do like. These are the alcohol flavours, of course, coming out of the beer, and it's 12.5%, so you're going to get quite a bit of that. But then it's layered. I mean, so you've got the wood and everything underneath, then you've got the treacle molasses, and then you've got the sweet caramel sitting in the middle. But from the very top, the very peak of that sweet caramel note, you do get a little element of biscuity quality, just kind of sitting on top of that and pushing its way out towards the edge of the tongue. So I really like how that side of this beer goes about its business as well. 100%. So yeah, that fruity side of this beer is particularly nice, I have to say. I like how that I certainly like how that side of things goes together in this one, for sure. The middle of your palate has a good little bit of complexity to it, this one, and you will notice that towards the back of that middle third of your tongue it develops a little touch of graininess as well. So yeah, quite a few interesting things going on in this beer, but I think that covers the middle third of your palate fairly extensively. So yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of an almost kind of, I'm almost tempted to say it's a little bit cakey. You almost get just a little bit of a cakey element in that border region there, and you can feel that there's a bit of a toasty, well-fired, grainy element there, and you can feel that on the back third of your palate, the base of that back third of your palate is really kind of toasty and grainy in a sense, but you can feel some of the yeasty elements kind of sitting there on top. And I've always found the yeast, or recently I've been finding that the yeasty notes, they come across as a little bit sort of airy, if you like. So the back third of your palate feels really quite sort of airy in a sense, and you can feel the sort of yeasty notes just there. And as you move further forward on the how would you say, if you move further forward on the palate, as you go from the back, it actually feels that the level of airiness that you get from these yeasty notes, it's quite intense, and then it just gradually condenses down until you move into the middle third of your palate. At the border region it drops quite quickly, and then you've got a really dense kind of middle malty layer on the tongue. So yeah, it's interesting. The yeasty notes are playing an interesting role in this beer, but yeah, back third of your palate, grainy and toasty, and then yeasty a little bit above that. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there, and as you move further forward, it's got a little touch of a herbal quality, and as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate, there's a nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of the beer. As I said, this beer is barrel aged, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one, but I think it works. I think in a sense it does work really quite well. It's got a nice little bit of lingering quality there. So yeah, a little bit of floral aromaticity on the front corners of the palate, a little bit herbal further back, and at the very back a little bit earthy. But round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of grassy in a sense. It's got a wee touch of, you know, zestiness to it as well. And yeah, I'm actually surprised at how much hoppy character is showing up in the flavour of this one. One, when I consider that it's a barrel-aged barley wine, and two, when it's from the 2020 series and it's now 2021, although I'm not sure exactly when Buxton would have released these. I tried to search around and find it, but the answer wasn't too forthcoming. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of things then. So again, in that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a wee bit of an almost kind of cakey sort of thing there, like a sort of brandy soaked cake or something like that, and you do get that on that border region, and you can feel there's a little bit of a toasty kind of grainy element in there as well. And then the base of that front third of your tongue is it's almost a little bit more kind of grainy and cakey in a sense. You can feel that on the front third of your palate, which is quite nice. But on the how would you say, on the fruity side of things, I think this one has some really interesting properties, so let's look at those. So yeah, when you first take this beer in, the first descriptor that comes to mind for the fruity side of things for me is sultanas. And for those of you that are watching, I've had a little bit of confusion from people about sultanas versus raisins. For me, raisins are the dried purple grapes, whereas sultanas is like a mix of green, white, and the more kind of, how would you say, sort of reddy, pinky sort of grapes. So yeah, sultanas is a mixed dried grape for me. This beer really has a lot of sultana type quality to it, and I like that. So on top of that kind of almost slightly cakey, spongy there that you've got a real layer of kind of just dried sultana fruit there. That's forming the backbone of the beer. It evolves to be a little bit more kind of figgy the further that you go into the beer. But yeah, sultanas for me, the flavour that comes out of this beer on the fruity side of things, it's sultanas all the way, and there's a few other little complexities in there as well, so let's try and pick out those. So yeah, when you take the beer in, I think it's fair to say that you will get a little tiny touch of a kind of a slight plummy raisiny note, but that's, you know, that is actually quite minimal, I would say. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't really take hold all that much. So yeah, it's a nice little bit of juicy kind of plummy raisiny element coming out of the beer in the beginning. Then you just get more, the thing, it just moves forward and you get more of that kind of sultana like quality out of this beer, which I think just that dominates the palate. But as you move on to that front half of the front third of your tongue, where you get the more oily fruity elements, you get a bit of a juicy kind of blackcurrant element out of the beer, and then as you go further into the aftertaste with it, it just becomes a little bit more sort of oily. I almost do get a little touch of a kind of perry ester out of this one too, but I think sultanas, for me, the fruity element out of this beer is sultanas all the way, and maybe a wee touch of like a dried apricot or something. There's a few interesting things going on in this beer for sure. But yeah, a little bit of plum and raisin in the beginning, then you've got sultanas forming the base fruit of the beer, a little bit of blackcurrant on the front half of that front third of your tongue, and then just a wee bit of an almost perry ester, dried apricot kind of evolving out of this one the further that you go. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes about its business. I think there's a lot of complexity to this, but you know, we know that Buxton produce some really good high alcohol beers. And this is my first go at a barley wine from them, and I have to say I am impressed. But I think that kind of covers the flavour side of this beer pretty comprehensively, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the flavour side of things, and let's focus on the mouthfeel to round off. So mouthfeel wise, yeah, I mean, I would say this beer, it's bottom end of full bodied for me. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got a nice bit of slickness to it, a nice little bit of an oily character. You know, the thing you have to remember about barrel aging is that barrel aging always takes away a little bit of the thickness of the mouthfeel, I find, and gives you those kind of infused woody flavours as compensation. So I would be really curious to see what this beer was like without the barrel aging, to see how kind of thick the original barley wine was. But yeah, it really has a real bit of slickness about it, this. So bottom end of mid-body for me, smooth carbonation and a nice slickness to it. In terms of hoppy bitterness, I mean, it's going to have a few IBUs to it, maybe about 30 or 40, something like that. It depends how much you age it, of course. I don't know how old this can actually is, but it's not going to blow the head off you in terms of the hoppy bitterness and things. But you've got a lovely sort of malty, woody backbone to this beer, and that's from the barrel aging. It develops a sweetness, I think, the further you go into the aftertaste. The brown sugars are nice, a little bit oily, little touch of kind of highly caramelized character to it as well, and then you've got some very nice kind of juicy fruity elements to this beer as well. So it's got everything that you would want of a barley wine, and stylistically I would say that this is a bit of a combination between an American and an English barley wine. It's got some of the more dark brown sugary elements to it that you'd expect of an English one, and you do in fairness get a little, the sultana type quality is something I would associate a little bit more with the English barley wines than the Americans, to be honest. But yeah, I really like this one. This has been a really solid introduction to Buxton Brewery barley wines, so I hope that I can review a few more from these guys. I need to get a go at another Scotch ale from them, because the last Scotch ale I had was a sour one, if I remember rightly, but I would love to have a go at a proper Scotch ale from these guys at some point soon. But yeah, this was a lovely beer, and I'm glad that I picked this up. Let's leave it at that for this review. This one was the Rudenko, a 12.5% bourbon barrel aged barley wine from Buxton Brewery in Buxton in the Peak District, a little bit to the south of Manchester and Sheffield in the middle of England. Really glad I picked this one up, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed it as well. A little bit of a longer review, but I think beers like this do require a little bit more time to kind of open up and things. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Buxton Brewery. Do give me some other barley wine recommendations. And let me know what your favourite beers have been in the barrel aged programme from Buxton as well. But thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. This was the Rudenko from Buxton Brewery in England. I hope that we can return to these guys soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.